Welcome back to the Path to Peace Therapy podcast. I'm Stephanie Buckley, an ADHD parenting strategist and family systems coach, mother to a thriving 23-year-old neurodivergent son with ADHD, and married for over 3 decades. And I want to say something today that may feel counterintuitive. It is deeply rooted in developmental psychology and nervous system science. Saying no is one of the most loving things you will ever do for your child. And yes, it is your responsibility to teach and build their frustration tolerance. We are living in a time where parents are increasingly uncomfortable with their children's discomfort. As parents, our biological instinct is to protect. We want to remove the obstacle, soothe the meltdown, and provide the yes that restores immediate peace. But in an ADHD household, this instinct is often a neurological disservice. When we erase every point of friction, we are inadvertently causing the neural pathways responsible for frustration tolerance to atrophy. The ADHD brain is already chemically biased toward low-effort, high-reward loops. It is a dopamine-seeking machine. By providing a smooth path, we are essentially allowing the prefrontal cortex to remain out of shape, unable to handle the weight of real-world demands. The no as neurological resistance training. We must reframe the word no. It is not a rejection. It is the architecture of friction. Think of friction in the physical world. Without it, you cannot walk, cars cannot brake, and nothing can be built. In development, friction is the no that forces the brain to pause. When you say no to the extra screen time, no to the immediate snack, or no to the impulse to quit a hard task, you are creating a regulatory gap. In that gap, the child's brain is forced to do something it hates. Endure. The scenario: your child is spiraling because they can't have the iPad now. The old way: you negotiate, explain, or give in to stop the noise. The architecture of friction: you hold the no with calm authority. You aren't causing their distress. You are providing the environmental scaffolding that requires them to use their own internal cooling system. The dopamine debt and the gift of the gap. In a world of instant gratification, an ADHD child is constantly over-leveraged on cheap dopamine. Every time we say yes to avoid a conflict, we are increasing their dopamine debt. We are teaching their nervous system that relief should be external and immediate. By intentionally introducing no, we are teaching them to navigate the gap. This gap is where executive function is born. It is where they learn response inhibition, the ability to stop an impulse; emotional regulation, the ability to feel a big emotion without being consumed by it; working memory, holding on to the why of the rule while the want is screaming. The shift from crisis manager to architect. If you want to raise a child who is unshakable, you must stop being the friction remover and start being the architect of resilience. This week, when you say no, do not apologize for it. Do not over-explain it. Recognize that their discomfort is not a sign that you are failing. It is the sound of their neural pathways getting stronger. Structure is not control. Structure is compassion. And sometimes the most compassionate thing you can do is let them sit in the hard until they realize they can survive it. We must stop viewing our child's frustration as a crisis to be managed and start viewing it as resistance training for the soul. We are not just saying no to a screen or a snack. We are building the architecture of a brain that can wait, endure, and ultimately lead itself. Adults hear no constantly. No, your proposal wasn't selected. No, the promotion went to someone else. No, the refinance was denied. No, your offer wasn't accepted. No, the contract isn't renewing. No, the opportunity has passed. Relationally, we hear no just as often. No, I need space. No, I don't agree. No, that hurt me. No, that doesn't work for me. Even in daily life, we encounter constant micro-no's. The light turns red. The meeting runs long. The email goes unanswered. The store is out of stock. The plan changes. Each one requires emotional flexibility. Each one demands a nervous system capable of absorbing friction without collapse. The external world operates on an uncompromising set of fixed limits that do not bend to accommodate individual preference or neurodivergent frustration. Out there, deadlines remain immovable. Organizational policies stand regardless of how unfair they feel. The boundaries of others must be respected without negotiation, and the law of the harvest remains absolute. Effort must precede the reward. When we, as parents, consistently remove discomfort at home under the guise of keeping the peace, we are not performing an act of protection. We are committing a strategic developmental error. We are effectively postponing our child's opportunity to build the essential neurological capacity required to tolerate the friction of reality. By sanitizing the home environment of all resistance, we inadvertently leave the ADHD nervous system in a state of developmental arrest. A brain that has never practiced sitting in the gap between a desire and its fulfillment interprets normal life boundaries as personal attacks or existential threats. Real-world limits then land as a traumatic shock rather than a manageable hurdle. If we want to raise resilient adults, we must allow our children to experience the architecture of friction now within the safety of our presence. We must recognize that their current disappointment is the very weight-bearing exercise their prefrontal cortex requires to eventually navigate a world that will not move for them. Frustration tolerance is not a personality trait. It is a neurobiological capacity built through repeated exposure to manageable disappointment inside a safe relationship. It requires coordination between the amygdala, which detects threat, and the prefrontal cortex, which regulates response and makes meaning of the moment. Children are not born with this fully online. The prefrontal cortex is still developing well into their late 20s. That means frustration tolerance must be practiced and strengthened, much like a muscle. When you say no and remain calm, you are helping wire their neural pathway between emotional activation and cognitive control. In psychology, personality traits are recognized as enduring but malleable patterns of behavior. While they are anchored in biological foundations, including genetics, innate temperament, and baseline nervous system sensitivity, they are ultimately sculpted by the environment, attachment security, cultural context, and the consistency of repeated learning. A child may be born with a higher propensity for caution, impulsivity, or emotional reactivity, but the final form of those traits is determined by the parenting, structure, and modeling they encounter. The prevailing clinical framework for understanding these tendencies is the Big Five, OCEAN model, which defines 5 broad dimensions of human personality: openness to experience. This reflects the brain's appetite for novelty. High openness manifests as creative flexibility and intellectual curiosity. Low openness creates a strong neurological preference for routine, predictability, and the known. Conscientiousness. This is the executive function dimension. It governs organization, self-discipline, and reliability. High conscientiousness facilitates follow-through, while low conscientiousness often presents as impulsivity or a struggle with organizational sequencing. In clinical terms, extroversion is an indicator of baseline cortical arousal. According to Eysenk's arousal theory, introverts possess a naturally higher level of internal brain activity, meaning they reach their optimal stimulation threshold quickly. For them, social environments can lead to sensory overstimulation. Extroverts, conversely, have a lower baseline of arousal and must seek out external, high-intensity social environments to reach that same psychological peak. It is a common misconception to equate introversion with shyness. Shyness is an anxiety-based fear of social judgment, whereas introversion is a biological preference for lower stimulation environments and internal processing. For an ADHD child, understanding this is vital. An extroverted ADHD brain is often sensation-seeking to compensate for low dopamine, while an introverted ADHD brain may experience meltdowns, not from defiance, but from sensory and social exhaustion. Agreeableness. This dimension tracks empathy and cooperation. It reflects the degree to which an individual prioritizes interpersonal harmony. Lower agreeableness often manifests as a blunt, competitive, or more analytical orientation toward others. Neuroticism, emotional sensitivity. This identifies the speed and intensity of the nervous system's stress response. Higher emotional sensitivity is not a character flaw. It is a vigilant nervous system that detects potential threats or nuances with high precision. It is critical to understand that personality traits are not inherently good or bad. They are neutral biological tendencies. Long-term functioning is not dictated by the trait itself, but by the individual's ability to regulate and channel it through environmental scaffolding. A child high in emotional sensitivity has the potential to become a deeply empathetic and intuitive leader if provided with regulation skills. Similarly, a child high in impulsivity can be mentored into a highly innovative and energetic entrepreneur if they are taught the architecture of structure and the discipline of the gap. The goal is not to change who the child is, but to build the executive capacity to manage how they show up in the world. This is where your parenting conversations often intersect with personality. Parents sometimes confuse developmental skill gaps like frustration tolerance or impulse control with personality traits. A child who melts down at hearing no is not necessarily strong-willed or difficult. They may simply lack the neurological maturity or practice in distress tolerance. Frustration tolerance is a learned regulatory skill. Personality traits are baseline tendencies. Understanding this distinction is powerful. Traits describe temperament, skills describe capacity. Traits are the raw material. Skills are what we build. It is a neurobiological capacity built through repeated exposure to manageable disappointment inside a safe relationship. It requires coordination between the amygdala, which detects threat, and the prefrontal cortex, which regulates response and makes meaning of the moment. Children are not born with this fully online. The prefrontal cortex is still developing well into their late 20s. That means frustration tolerance must be practiced and strengthened, much like a muscle. When you say no and remain calm, you are helping wire their neural pathway between emotional activation and cognitive control. You are teaching their brain that discomfort does not equal danger. Now layer in dopamine. Dopamine is not simply about pleasure, it is about anticipation and pursuit. It fuels motivation and goal-directed behavior, but it functions best when paired with delay. When gratification is immediate and constant, the brain does not learn patience. It learns to eliminate discomfort instantly. When instant relief is unavailable, anxiety rises because the nervous system has not practiced waiting. Delayed gratification strengthens executive function, impulse control, and emotional stability. Every time you say, "not right now," and stay steady, you are strengthening the circuitry that allows your child to endure effort before reward. That is not deprivation, that is development. If children rarely hear no inside the home because we negotiate, soften, reverse, or over-explain boundaries in order to avoid them feeling upset or discomfort, their nervous system never practices recovery. They may appear comfortable in the moment, but they are unprepared for everyday life. The home is truly the safest environment to build this skill. Not harshly, not rigidly, but consistently, predictably, and warmly. When you say no and stay connected, you are teaching something profound. You can feel disappointed and still be safe. You can feel angry and still be loved. You can want something and not get it and still be okay. That pairing of limitation and connection is what wires resilience. You do not need a lecture. You do not need to over-explain. You need calm repetition. Say no, and then pause. I know you're disappointed. Pause again. This is the rule, and we are sticking to it. And then you hold the boundary. You allow the wave of emotion to rise and fall without rescuing your child back into comfort through negotiation or reversal of what you set in place. That wave is the workout. That wave is where frustration tolerance is built. If holding the line feels hard, it is because it requires your own nervous system to tolerate distress as well. Did you learn this as a young child? Or are you repeating the pattern? Are you repeating history? It requires you to withstand your child's temporary dysregulation without interpreting it as harming them. But remember, we are not raising children for today's mood. We are raising adults for tomorrow's realities. And tomorrow will include rejection, delay, loss, and limits. The question is not whether your child will hear no. The question is whether their nervous system will know how to remain steady when they do. Saying no is not withholding love. It is scaffolding strength. It is preparing a developing brain for the world it will eventually inhabit. And yes, I'm going to say it again, it is your responsibility to teach it and help build it. Your child will not grow into frustration tolerance by accident. They will not absorb it through osmosis. It is constructed through repeated, steady exposure to boundaries inside a safe relationship. When you hold the line, you are not just managing behavior in the moment you are shaping neural pathways. You are strengthening the connection between the emotional brain and the thinking brain. You are teaching the prefrontal cortex to stay online when the amygdala flares. That is regulation. That is maturity and development. Remember what you are actually building. You are building a strong, regulated, responsible, and tolerant human being. You are building someone who can delay gratification instead of demanding immediate relief. Someone who can sit in discomfort without exploding, collapsing, or escaping. Someone who can hear no, feel disappointed, and still function. That skill protects them in classrooms, in friendships, in sports, in college, in the workplace, and in marriage. It protects them from impulsive decisions. It protects them from emotional volatility. It protects them from seeking quick fixes when life feels unfair. And life will feel unfair, but then they will experience when it is. Life will ebb and flow. The world is not structured around your child's preferences. Deadlines do not adjust for moods. Employers do not renegotiate expectations because someone is upset. Partners do not always respond perfectly. Systems do not bend simply because something feels hard. If your child has never practiced tolerating unfairness at home, the wrong color cup, the earlier bedtime, the loss of a turn, the denied request, then their nervous system will interpret normal life friction as a crisis. But is it? No, it's life. When you allow your child to experience manageable unfairness while remaining connected, you are teaching cognitive flexibility. You are teaching emotional endurance. You are teaching them that feelings are temporary and survivable. You are modeling that discomfort does not equal danger. That is powerful. We are not raising children to be comfortable at all costs. We are raising adults who can navigate a complex world without unraveling at the first sign of disappointment. Boundaries are not about control. They are about preparation. They are about equipping a developing brain with the capacity to endure delay, tolerate injustice, recover from rejection, and persist through effort. That doesn't happen through lectures. It happens through repetition, through steady no's, through predictable limits, through calm presence while emotions rise and fall. You are not just parenting for today's peace. You are building tomorrow's resilience. This episode is for educational purposes and to provide support. It is not a substitute for professional mental health evaluation, diagnosis, or treatment. The more we understand how frustration tolerance shapes emotional development, the more confident we can become in holding boundaries that feel hard in the moment, but protective in the long term. Thank you for spending this time with me. If this episode was helpful, share it with a fellow parent, caregiver, or educator who might need it too. You can subscribe to stay up to date on future episodes and find additional tools and resources at thepathtopeacetherapy.com. Follow me on Instagram at thepathtopeacetherapy. If you are in California, I offer virtual sessions if you are not in the Hermosa Beach and South Bay area. You can book online at the Path to Peace Therapy. And as always, take a deep breath, give yourself some grace, and remember, peace is possible, and you don't have to do this alone.